I can build a suite of 20 applications, or I can build a platform that can build 20 applications.
You were seeing this world of Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3.
Yes.
And you decided to start Lyric, which I want to quote you, at its core is the decision to go from a company building around project IP to a company building around product IP.
Right.
What is Lyric today?
Lyric is decision science, decision intelligence, decision-making platform. So the whole idea is like build a platform that mimics the idea of Lego blocks. What Lego did to the toy industry, we want to do to the supply chain AI industry.
We talk a lot about how you can't build enduring enterprise value without customer value first.
The companies that have the biggest and the most painful supply chain problems are the large enterprises.
Yeah.
Some customers are coming with very specific point problems. Say, I have an inventory problem, can you solve it? I have a customer service problem, can you solve it?
But for the average customer, they don't have that luxury. How do they discover what is possible to be solved with AI, with large decision intelligence models? Welcome to the Primary Supply Chain Podcast. I'm Zach Fredericks, a principal here, and I lead our industrial specialization. Today, we have a special episode because in addition to our featured guest, I'm joined by Cassie Young, who's my colleague, general partner here, and we're going to be talking to Ganesh Ramakrishna, who is the founder and CEO of Lyric. We're going to be talking about the story of Lyric, their recent fundraise. And before we get into that, I want to set the stage a little bit because I think it's important how closely Lyric aligns with the supply chain thesis and general view on the world that we hold at Primary, which is 2.5 years ago when I joined, we were really focused on this world of consistent supply chain shocks. We saw it in a pandemic, in ground wars, in boats getting stuck in canals. And we knew, and we continue to know, that those shocks are going nowhere. And so to us, the mandate of technology and of early stage technology investors was to find technology that reduces the cost and complexity of building more supply chain durability. And as we mapped out the world of different businesses that could fit into that view, decision intelligence was core to what we thought needed to exist. And the reason for that is simply that as we speak to chief supply chain officers, we continue to run into this problem that they know they need to build a more durable supply chain. They know they need to find ways to actually be redundant and to have dual sourcing strategies, but they don't know how to execute on that. And it's because they're dealing with multi-billion-dollar international networks of complexity that are really challenging to get to without advanced data science. So with that, I want to introduce Ganesh Ramakrishna. Ganesh, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So before we get into the backstory of you and of Lyric, could you just give us the elevator pitch on what Lyric is?
Yeah, feeds right exactly what you said, right? Lyric is a decision science, decision intelligence, decision-making platform. I use all these words because I have to pick the audience correctly, who's listening to the podcast, because people use these different terms to describe what Lyric is. For supply chain, sorry, I missed that part.
And I talked a little bit about why it fits so closely with our supply chain thesis, but it also fell really closely into what we were looking at from an enterprise AI perspective. And I think that comes more from your camp. So Cassie, could you tell us a little bit about your thesis and what you saw in Lyric?
Yes, and Lyric is a fun business for us in many ways, but particularly because it sits right in the middle of the Venn diagram between the industrials and supply chain thesis and this broader enterprise thesis. And I think there's a couple tenets of the enterprise thesis that are worth talking about today. One is this classic tension between, are you building a point solution or are you building a platform?
100%.
What we regularly like to say at Primary, investing at seed, is that's really hard to discern at seed, right? Because everyone needs to start with a wedge that might look like a point solution. But One thing we can talk about later was, Ganesh, I think even when we met you for the seed round, the product was so robust. And you said to me, if an outsider saw my product roadmap, they would tell me I'm crazy. But I know I'm onto something, so we can come back to that. But I think the other thing we're thinking about within enterprise is, what are the applications where domain expertise is actually mission critical to the end game? And I think I certainly have learned a lot about supply chain working with you, and I think my favorite lesson is that when you look at decisions and predictions, 70% of what goes into it requires this deep domain expertise in operations research, right? And I know we'll hear more about your story, but we love finding any evidence of that in various companies. The third thing I'll talk about with enterprise is this unique moment of how we're democratizing access to insights and to models, and so many companies were just tied to these services-driven businesses for so many years, right? Where they needed a forward deploy engineer, or worse yet, they were signing $50,000 SOW after $50,000 SOW to get to an outcome. And we love these tools that are really putting the power of business decisions in the hands of the end users. And then the final thing we always think about on enterprise, and this is particularly important in the era of AI, is this idea that you can't have enterprise value without having customer value, right? And I think we're living in a sea of agents right now. Everyone's trying a lot of stuff. They're getting like 10% lift. But there's this question of how do you drive enduring customer value? And I think you had a really unique story for how you're thinking about that we can get into a little later.
I'm excited to talk about all of these things. Yes.
Great. So let's actually start by focusing on you and your story. So from wherever you want to start it.
Yeah, so from day zero, born and raised in Mumbai, India, right? Grew up in that city. As you heard me say many times, one thing you get for free from anybody from Mumbai is a lot of hustle, just like people from New York City, right? So I grew up, did my engineering out of school in Mumbai, left India circa 2000 to do my master's in operations research, which ended up being a great gift because operations research sits right at the intersection of math and business. Two topics I really love, right? So did that for a couple of years, then went to work in the trucking industry, Zach. I know that's an industry you like a lot, right? Worked for a trucking company called Schneider National, worked there for 3 years. Then went to work for a startup in supply chain modeling, supply chain data science called Logic Tools. That company went through a couple of acquisitions. We ended up at IBM. I spent 4 years at IBM, learned how to sell to enterprises. And Cassie, you will appreciate this. Like one of the hard puzzles of being in the enterprise AI space is learning how to sell, right? And I got that training at IBM.
For sure.
Finished my training at IBM, and then in 2013, I saw this opportunity of machine learning, right? Which was very new at that point in time. Big data was new at that point in time. And my co-founder for my first business, OPEX Analytics, he and I looked at this opportunity and said, hey, we should do something about it. So we decided to leave IBM and start a business. That is OPEX Analytics.
Right.
We ran it for 8 years. And the thesis behind OPEX Analytics was to solve the unsolved problems in supply chain. Because new technology, new scale of data, we want to solve those problems. So we worked with a lot of customers in those 8 years, the Nikes, the Nordstroms, the McDonald's of the world. They had unsolved problems. They would call us in. We were like an innovation partner to them. Had like 150 data scientists, OR scientists, software engineers, a little bit like your forward deployed engineer kind of model, right? So built that business. 2019, Lamasoft, which is a supply chain software company in the modeling space, they looked at us. They said, hey, look, our future needs to look different. We need to be machine learning first. So they acquired us. My charter at Lamasoft was to rethink Lamasoft. But what ended up happening, Cassie, was, within 6 months, Coupa, a public company, you folks know about them, a public company in the procurement space, they heard the combined story, they liked the story, and they acquired Lamasoft. So we went with that acquisition. It was like a back-to-back acquisition. And then I was like, that's not the journey I want to be a part of. So I left, took a break, and started Lyric. But I'll give a pause. I tend to go on long.
So there's a lot to unpack in what led to your decision to start Lyric there. Could you break down the opportunity that you saw when you wanted to start OPEX? So the generation before Lyric.
Yes. The generation before Lyric did not understand machine learning, right? It is just like standard software that would capture a workflow in the supply chain, especially in supply chain, it would be like capture a workflow. Let's say, for example, demand planning, which is the science and art of getting a supply chain ready to know what will be the demand the next 12 weeks, next 6 months, next 12 months, right? So that's demand planning, and a traditional planning software will capture that process very well, but will not capture the science behind it very well. So that was
what is the science behind it? Like, could you break that down?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's not one thing. If it was one magical thing, I would have said it, but it's a family of things that come together to solve these problems. As Cassie pointed out, the biggest one is operations research. That's a branch of math that is useful for solving puzzles. obviously there are many puzzles in supply chain. The ones that you live every single day is, let's say you're taking an Uber ride, right? They have to match up a car to you, right? And there are hundreds of people in this area and hundreds of cars in this area. How do you match the cars to the rides, right? So that's a operations research kind of problem, right? So that's one. The other is well known as machine learning for predictions. So supply chain is full of predictions. You have to come up with a prediction, say what my demand is going to be, will the truck arrive on time, will the vendor ship the product on time? So lots of prediction problems in supply chain, and that requires traditional statistics. Then in circa 2012, it became machine learning. And then in 2018, 2019, it became deep learning. And now there is like machine learning, deep learning, and Gen AI techniques, large time series models. So there's a lot going on there.
Right. And so if I could extract,
yeah,
the takeaway from me, a very non-technical person, I would say that operations research is focused on optimization. You have
Correct.
thousands of inputs and you're trying to figure out the optimal outcome. Yeah. And machine learning is really focusing on prediction based on a bunch of different parameters. What's the most likely outcome? So you're at OPEX, you're building custom software solutions, powerful OR applications for customers.
Yes.
You go through the corporate journey of getting acquired twice. You're on the bench, you're spending time with family, and something wakes you up at night that says you have to start Lyric. Walk us through that moment.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you, I don't know if I shared this with you, but I did nothing for like almost a year.
I find that tough to imagine.
It is
Yes,
tough.
yeah.
It was tough. I learned a lot. I have a lot of respect for people who can sit and do nothing now, right? I did not have that kind of respect. Now I have a lot of respect, right? But I got the itch, standard like second time founder itch, like, hey, I'm done doing nothing. I have to do something. And I actually went on a tour of different ideas. I did not land on Lyric right away because my idea was like, hey, I've done supply chain. Let me see if I can do something else, right? I took a small detour into the world of blockchain and crypto. It's not a good one, but did something else, tried something else. But within like 6 to 8 weeks, I kind of discovered that the idea of a founder market fit. That's the VC speak, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Right, so I lived that, because I couldn't stay with the problem for beyond 2 or 3 weeks. And then I realized, hey, look, I should go back to supply chain, right? I know the space, right? I have compounded knowledge in this space. I have compounded networks in this space. And then I said, hey, if I'm going to come back to supply chain, the idea came to me in no time. It just didn't take any time at all because the opportunity was very obvious. That nobody had imagined a ground up build of supply chain. Now I would use the word decision making. It's a mouthful, but that's the right set of words. Decision making technology for all things supply chain. Right? And one thing I like to use is the supply chain is very heterogeneous. And then what I mean by that is there are many decisions to be made in supply chain, right? Some very strategic, some very tactical, some very operational, right? It could be like, hey, predicting when the truck will come. It is on the other side, trying to figure out my strategic plan for the next 5 years. So there are a lot of decisions in between these two, kind of very granular to very strategic, and requiring very different math techniques, requiring very different compute techniques. Nobody had reimagined this world as a data science, decision science first approach. And that we saw as the opportunity. I was like, I got to go bounce on this.
Yeah. So, and one thing that was really helpful as you were walking me through that view of the world was understanding why so much software that had been built didn't really accommodate for this is also a mouthful, heterogeneity of supply chains.
Yes.
Could you you touched on it before when you mentioned Gen 2.
Yeah.
But what is, in your view, Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3 software for supply chain?
Thank you for asking the question. I think Gen 1 is like your traditional ERP, right? It's basically, for the first time, we're capturing a process, digitally capturing a process in the form of a software, right? That could be procurement, that could be supply chain planning, it could be supply chain execution, order execution, WMS, TMS. kind of basic infrastructure for supply chain. Then came Gen 2, which is basically saying, hey, look, I can move it on the cloud. I can be more collaborative, right? I can capture the process even better than I did in Gen 1. It'd be more comprehensive. That was Gen 2. That you got a lot of point solutions.
What are some examples of?
Yeah, so Gen 2 would be your SAP Vault. So SAP has planning solutions, decisioning solutions, ERP like Oracle, Blue Yonder, Kinaxis, O9. These are kind of the vendors you'd hear a lot in the supply chain decisioning space, supply chain planning space, right? As Gen 2, right? And Gen 3, to answer your question, is basically anybody who takes like a decision science, data science first approach, because I think the world is changing where we are moving away from a process first thinking to a decision first thinking, right? So it's like completely flipped, right? And that's the shift you're seeing from Gen 2 to Gen 3.
Got it.
Right?
You were seeing this world of Gen 1, Gen 2, and Gen 3.
Yes.
And you decided to start Lyric, which I want to quote you, at its core is the decision to go from a company building around project IP to a company building around product IP.
Right.
What is Lyric today?
Yeah, got it. So I before that, I can also talk about the tension between buy and build. Coming out of OPEX, we saw this tension between buy and build, right? You either had to choose either point applications that you buy off the shelf, or you had to go build.
Right.
And that build is super expensive. And we were part of that process. Like, every use case, every application is a 7-figure bill. And a supply chain has 30 use cases. It's too expensive.
And so if they're not hiring you for those 7-figure builds, who are they hiring?
So they had 3 choices. One was hire consulting partners. By that time, the big 3 consulting firms, strategy consulting firms, had all figured out there's a massive opportunity here. They had massive teams building supply chain data science teams, branded differently, each one of them. Then you had the horizontal platforms, right? The Palantirs of the world. They started playing in this space as well. Again, the challenge there was, very expensive, use case by use case kind of approach, right? One use case is a unique code base that sits on a generic platform. And then finally, build your own in-house teams. And that's where, the best examples I can think of there are Amazon and Walmart, right? Amazon is this well-known team called Amazon Scott, where Amazon poured about $1 billion a year, rough math, to kind of build all the supply chain decisioning technology in-house. Walmart also spent hundreds of millions of dollars a year. Same thing, same idea. So those are the 3 choices available to any large enterprise. Build your own team, very expensive. Go to consulting partners, which is they'll do 1 or 2 use cases. How do you scale that? It's not scalable. Or go to a horizontal platform, which is also somewhat like consulting because they needed a lot of forward deployed engineers to get the job done.
Right. So I think that's a good segue into what you're doing differently. Because you're not any of those 3 options. You're something new. Right. So what is Lyric?
When we started day one, we were like, hey, we want to be a platform, right, that can help address many, many use cases at the same time. One, right, not building point applications for each use case. Very nuanced point, but structural difference is like I can build a suite of 20 applications, or I can build a platform that can build 20 applications, right? So that was one kind of founding thesis, that we want to build a platform. The second thing was we wanted to be so democratized that end business users can use the platform, because a lot of money is spent in services, right, to get these solutions up and going. And we want to reduce the total cost of ownership of each one of these solutions. How aggressive or how ambitious can we be? Can we get solutions done in a day, in a week, that would otherwise take months or years? Like, can we go that far? Was the founding idea. So we paid a lot of attention to usability, and that's where the no-code aspect comes in. Like, we built a lot of no-code technology so that the technology, powerful math technology, is accessible to the business user. So that's how we started Lyric.
And what are some examples of problems that you're solving? Who are you solving those problems for? Bring to life what the power of that platform actually does.
Yeah. So we spent about 2 years building this platform and with no customers. We were very comfortable doing this without customers. But when we felt we were ready, our first customer, when he looked at the pitch, he was like, okay, you say you're a platform, you can solve many use cases. Let me give you 2 bookends of problems. One was a very well understood supply chain problem, which is rough cut capacity planning, which is like saying at the start of the year and on an ongoing basis, rolling forward 12 months, tell me, do I have enough supply to meet all the demand that the finance team is forecasting? If I don't have enough demand, can you tell me where should I source products from? Is it in month 3, month 4, month 6? So coming up with the entire supply chain network plan, if you will, for the next 12 months. Now, this audience, the supply chain audience that is listening will say, that's a well-known problem, we know how to solve this. But right next to it, he also gave me another problem, which is like, okay, this is a food and beverage company, right? They serve Walmart. Every time Walmart runs out of this product, they get a call. Right, from Walmart saying, hey, what happened? Where's the product? And my customers telling me like, my inventory planners are running helter-skelter every week. There's a stock out somewhere and they're just trying to figure out what happened. And they spend 2 to 3 days coming up with one answer. And there are hundreds of these instances every week. Solve that problem for me. When we looked at that, that's like, there's no point application in the market that does that problem. If you give this problem to a data scientist can go crack this problem in about 6 months' time. It will be a team of data scientists say, hey, look, this is a stock out forensics problem, classic data science problem, and they would take 6 months to solve this. It took us less than, I would say, 4 weeks, kind of put the first solution together and said, hey, look, now, when there's a stock out, the inventory planner can actually get a report that says, here's the 4 likely reasons why the product stocked out, right? To be able to do this bookend and the other bookend in a single platform was the aha for us, saying, hey, now we've cracked the code. We know how to solve a wide variety of problems in a single platform fast.
Yeah.
I admittedly was chuckling a little bit because I had forgotten about your quick dabble in the crypto world.
Yes.
And as we're sitting here talking, your energy is so palpable. One phrase that Zach uses a lot that I've now borrowed is this concept of the zero CAC founder in any vertical, right? The people who are just so next level committed to that cause that people want to work with them, right? They want access to that brain. And I think I'm just inclined to mention that because that was just something that was such an important part of your story.
Thank you.
But let's talk about this. So you kind of painted this vision, right, for where Lyric goes. Let's get into brass tacks of what the product looks like today.
Yes.
Right, so let's talk maybe perhaps about the Lyric Studio more broadly, precisely how customers are using this. I have a few specific questions that I'd love to hear a little bit more about, but let's start sort of macro level where we're at today.
Absolutely. So we like to describe it as a 4-layered cake, right? I don't know how well I'll do the job. Let me try. Right? It's like, so the whole idea is like build a platform that mimics the idea of Lego blocks. Right? What Lego did to the toy industry, we want to do to the supply chain AI industry. Right? So what that translates to the 4-layered cake. At the bottom of that 4-layered cake is like the data infrastructure. Supply chain is very unique, where you need speed in some use cases. The planners are a very impatient bunch, so they need the answer in 30 seconds or 5 seconds. And there is scale. There are some problems that will run 24 hours, 36 hours, and you need to be able to scale to managing billions and billions of rows of data. So we need to build a data infrastructure that handles both those bookends.
Yep.
On top of that, Cassie, there's where we kind of completely took off from the traditional software thinking. We got inspired by Hugging Face, which is like the catalog for all Gen AI models.
Yep.
We built that catalog of algorithms that are supply chain specific, right? And we say we built 2 catalogs. One we built, right? With that Lyric, we have a massive data. It says team of scientists, applied scientists that go crack all these problems for us. Then we allow the customer to bring their own catalog as well. So if you have a data science team, they're creating IP, bring that IP also in. And that's completely safe. Nobody can see the code, including us, right? So the third layer is the Maria layer. Maria is this business analyst, modeler kind of persona in every business, who has this unique attribute that she can understand what these algorithms do, but she doesn't want to sit and code in Python. And she's also very good at talking to the business and understanding their business problem, right? So this Maria persona, she can, in no code, build the product that the customer is asking you to solve, right? So she can, in no code, pull data, shape data, daisy chain, that's a word we use a lot, all these different IP from the bottom layer, and build a product. And when she thinks the product is ready, she'll wrap an application around it, right? That again in no code. She'll go to the business and say, hey, is this what you're looking for? If the business says yes, ready to deliver. If the business says no, she can iterate right there in front of the business owner saying, hey, is this what you want? Is this something else you want? Like, so she can iterate with the business owners on the product. So we're trying to solve two problems. One, on the bottom end, be extremely high powered, like the best in class algorithms, highly scalable things. But on the front end, make it highly accessible for you to configure any product you want and make it very accessible to the consumer of the product on the business side.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, I mean, we had the privilege of leading the seed round 2 years ago.
Yes.
Lots has happened with the business, lots has happened with the world, right? In terms of just progress on the AI front. And I think what you just described, I think there's sort of two buckets of things that you talked about, right? One is the algorithmic intelligence. And then second is sort of where we're going more in the agentic intelligence. So maybe you could just take a few minutes to talk to us about that, and specifically maybe how your perspective has shifted vis-a-vis the technology that was available 2 years ago versus what's available to your team today.
Agentic AI is the gift that we did not plan for. It's beautiful, right? Because, so you touched on algorithmic intelligence, right? I think that's the core of the puzzle solving in supply chain. That's not going to go away. Right? These operations research models are not going to go away. The prediction models are not going to go away. That's not going to get replaced with agentic AI. Because for the first 6-12 months, there was a lot of confusion in the market saying, oh, agentic AI is here, or Gen AI is here. Do we need any software here? And we were sure that that's not the case, but it was hard to communicate. Now it's easier to communicate, right? So the core algorithms are going to be there forever, right? Agentic AI just makes everything a whole lot more accessible. This Maria persona I talked about, she will build the products faster, better. She will get, these co-pilots, these agents that are going to help her build the product faster and better. So it's kind of reduces the product life cycle even more, right? The cycle to build the product.
All right, Ganesh, I'm going to replay something you just said to me. Agents are everywhere, right? This is a blessing in that the customers are following the story that you're presenting. It's a curse in that it's very crowded, right? Our buyers are distracted in every which vertical. And so as I said at the onset, we talk a lot about how you can't build enduring enterprise value without customer value first. And so I'd love to understand, just from a go-to-market perspective with the business, how you are capturing the customer's attention right out of the gate, right? I think there's some unique things you guys are doing even as early as the proof of concept. And then how you're driving that enduring ROI all through the life cycle.
Yeah, great question. So what's happening is we see different customers at different stages of appetite. I wouldn't say maturity, but appetite for new ways of thinking. Some customers are coming with very specific point problems. Say, I have an inventory problem, can you solve it? I have a customer service problem, can you solve it? Right? I have a network optimization problem, can you solve it? So that's one level of appetite. And we go into these customers, quickly solve that problem. Right, with our platform, and then say this happens within 2 to 3 weeks, right? So they spend a couple of weeks kind of getting the data together. Then we take a couple of weeks to solve the problem, and then at the end of it, they have a jaw-dropping experience. Like, how did this happen this quick? Right, and then they go on a discovery journey. What else can we do? Right, and then we put a roadmap together for them, and they say, look, I can go after a lot of this roadmap, and that's one kind of customer journey where we show a path that, hey, look, with the platform, you don't solve one problem, you can solve many, many problems. The other journey, Cassie, I'm very excited about this, especially happened in the last, I would say, 4 to 6 months, is there are large enterprises, these Fortune 100 types. They walk in, having lived through this entire journey over the last 10, 15 years. They've talked to all the point solution vendors. They actually have all these point solution vendors. They have massive data science teams. They've used some of the horizontal platforms. And they come in and say, hey, look, I need something different. None of these are the answers. I'm looking for something different because my mandate, and there's a coincidence here, every one of them comes and tells me, I have to take out $1 billion from my supply chain. A nice big round number, right? Help me do this. And when I say, what are you thinking of? They walk in with 30 use cases, saying, here's the 30 use cases I have. Tell me how you can solve these use cases. And that is super exciting because we've been waiting for this for the last 3-4 years. Hey, who's going to come and understand what is the opportunity? And now we're seeing customers, Cassie, who walk in with a deep appreciation for the need in their business for something transformative to, as a supply chain platform. They're speaking the right language. Right? And there it's then it's a feature thing. Hey, look, you are showing me 30 use cases. I'm going to show you all the capabilities that exist. What do you think?
Yeah.
And that's where we're going today.
Sure. And I love that you hit on the jaw-dropping experience because as we talked about at the onset, so many of these large enterprises are just, they're historically trained to expect services, right? That could take literally months to get something done. I loved when you and I were catching up a couple weeks ago and you really blew my mind where you said, yeah, I think we figured out a way where we can get a proof of concept around data in 6 hours.
100%.
So that blew my mind. I was jaw-dropping for your investors. So maybe you could talk just for a minute about that.
I think see, the magic is when it all comes together.
Yeah.
Right? It's today you can, pull data, shape data in no time. Right? It's like all you need is wherever your data lake is, is it Snowflake, Databricks, once you have the credentials, the data shows up in no time. Right? Shipping it is very, very fast. Yeah. Right. And then on top of that, once you know the business context, that 6 hours is a little bit biased. We know the business context, we know the data, right? So
that's
it's
all right. That's allowed.
Right? So once you have that, then saying, hey, attaching to the right algorithms, training a machine learning model, daisy chaining all of it, converting that into an application is like click, 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 right? Yeah. And tomorrow that'll be agents, but today it's a bunch of clicking, and you have the product ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the customer looks at it and says, they can't believe what they see sometimes, right? And it's not just the fact that the product was built. I mean, that's one part of it, of course. But Cassie, the scale, and this is not just Lyric. I don't want to take all the credit for it because we're sitting on the shoulders of some amazing, foundational technologies.
Sure.
Right? A lot of it is open source.
Yeah.
A lot of it is commercial. But these foundational technologies that have taken a full decade to kind of fully bake in data side, on the compute side, which is both distributed compute and accelerated compute, and data, compute, algorithms, right? So the third part, right? Tremendous algorithmic innovation, right? Anybody working at Lyric, I can assure you, all the builders at Lyric, they feel like they're kids in a candy store. That's how we all feel, right? Because there is so much amazing tech coming out every day. Building on top of it, we are sitting closer to the customer, solving problems close to the customer. Building on top of this is amazing.
And I feel like it has to be very rewarding for the team. I mean, I feel like when Zach and I have spoken with some customers, we've heard vernacular like, oh, that's a Lyric team, right? An organization, which is what you absolutely want to hear.
Yes.
So we've talked a little bit in abstract about the customers. Let's talk about where the business is today in terms of who are these customers? Who are the types of teams that you're working with? What types of enterprises are most attractive to you? And talk just a little bit around in the business building.
So I knew this is how this will go because the companies that have the biggest and the most painful supply chain problems are the large enterprises. Right? So our thesis was, and it's kind of counterintuitive to typical startup building, which is you go mid-market, not the fastest sales, but typical is go to mid-market and go enterprise that way, right? Our thesis was we will go large enterprise first and then come mid-market if needed, when needed, right? That's what we did right at the outset. So the last 4 years, we've kind of penetrated about, right now closing on 30 customers.
Amazing.
Right? All blue chip logos, right? Most blue chip logos, right? So, and not just where we are today, the pipeline of prospects we're talking to, and Cassie, these sales cycles last Zach, 6, 9, 12 months. They're shrinking. That's the good news. They're shrinking because the appetite is there, but still it's 6, 9, 12 months of work with the customers, and that's where we see, right? Large enterprises, we will converge on 50 customers in 6 to 12 months from now, and that's a good kind of foundation of adopters from which we can scale. Right?
And I always say no one will ever tell your story, no offense, better than your customers, right? And I feel like I've learned it's a very tight-knit community and word is very much getting out.
100%, 100%. They see it as a new way of doing things.
And so within that customer base, because it's evolved across industries and even buyer personas a lot in the last 2 years. I think that segues nicely into the different categories of use. You mentioned some use cases around supply chain planning. You mentioned others around, I think you said stockout forensics, and a lot more than that. Could you break down how you think about the use cases and categories of software you're building?
Thanks for asking that question, because it was hard. When you build a platform, it's sometimes very hard to describe what it can do. But I think 4 years later, we have some vernacular to kind of explain what this is, right? So we see three kind of cohorts of use cases. The first cohort is what I call modeling and analysis. This is when the supply chain team wants to test an idea in a sandbox. Typically, it's associated with strategic decisions. It's just like, if you're a large retailer saying, hey, look, I want to expand. I want to go from 1,000 stores to 3,000 stores. How do I go about expanding that supply chain to 3,000 stores? It's a very different supply chain, right? So if you say, hey, look, I want to do retail and I also want to do same-day delivery in e-commerce. Now, that's a very different supply chain. How do you structure that supply chain? Those are like typical strategic modeling questions. That scope is now expanded on the modeling side to more tactical and operational decisions as well. So that's one world, modeling and analysis. Traditionally there was Lamasoft was a vendor player in that space. And now we represent like a Gen 3 post Lamasoft era, right? So that's modeling and analysis. The second is like a big category actually, which is in the supply chain world, it's called supply chain planning. And it's really a set of 5 or 6 capabilities, Zach, because it's just like, I would say some of them well known are supply planning, demand planning, inventory planning, transportation planning, distribution planning. There's like 5 or 6 kind of use cases. And that's where it's like the SAPs, the Oracles, and then the Blue Yonder can access O9s. These are like the players that exist in that space. That's the second cohort. We think, again, even in that space, there's a lot of room to rethink planning as algorithms first planning, right? Rather than process first planning. I think that's the change that we represent. And the third is what we call frontier use cases. And I call it frontier use cases because there's a lot of unsolved problems in supply chain that do not have words, do not have, hey, you can't, there's no short form for saying it. Like you have to describe the problem. If you have to describe the problem you want to solve, it ends up being a math problem at the end of the day. But you have to describe the stockout, for instance, is a good example of a frontier use case. And sometimes frontier use case comes by saying, hey, I want to do this and this. I want to do a strategic plan that feeds a tactical plan, that feeds an execution plan, right? How do you think about that? You can't bring these 3 softwares talk to each other, impossible.
And that'll always be, in a heterogeneous supply chain world, those combinations of customized requirement, of combinations of planning plus frontier use case will always be a thing that multinational supply chains need.
Yeah, like I'll give you an example, right? So we have a customer that wants to do end-to-end, very, very large CPG company, top 10, maybe top 5, right? CPG company wants to do end-to-end supply chain optimization. And what they mean is from sourcing to manufacturing to distribution to last mile, right? The supply chain is so big that you could not solve it in one model, right? And the first 3/4 is like a network problem. The last 25% is actually a transportation problem. It's completely last mile routing, etc. So they had this massive problems. Last generation technology, I will not name technologies, all of those technologies could not solve the problem. So they went to NVIDIA, said, hey, we have this massive problem. We're not able to solve it. Like we tried everything. Can't solve this problem. And NVIDIA, we had a relationship with NVIDIA at that point, turned around to us and said, hey, Lyric, can you take a look at this? And when we looked at this, we felt like we are built for this. This is the scale that we are thirsty for. And we took a crack at the problem. 6 weeks, they have a massive daisy chain set of models that is actually solving their end-to-end charter that they had. Network, transportation. These are all the kind of use cases I have. So it's not traditional modeling, it's not traditional planning. These are all frontier use cases.
So for that customer, they were so big that they were able to go to NVIDIA and get a referral to you. They're probably big enough that they have prioritized queue with NVIDIA leadership. But for the average customer, they don't have that luxury.
Yes.
How do they discover what is possible to be solved with AI, with large decision intelligence models?
Yeah. Today, supply chains in some ways not that hard, right? You're solving the cost problem, you're trying to solve the service problem. And usually you have a list of things that you want to solve for, right? So what has happened now, Zach, with Lyric is the cost of curiosity has gone down significantly. The customer can get trained in Lyric within a week or 2, right? And then they have this massive capability in front of them. Ask the business, hey, what's your problem? and see if you can solve that problem. Right? That cost of building these solutions has gone down significantly, so they can try many things. There's no fixed thing that they have to go after. It's not like a 12-month implementation cycle they have to go after. Within weeks, they can try 2 or 3 things and see which one sticks. Go with that first, and then go after the second, and then go after the next 5. Right?
Yeah. And so as you go from a world of modeling and supply chain planning problems, which is what you were talking about in 2023 when we met you, Lyric is known for supply chain planning.
Yes.
But now you have all these frontier use cases that are taking up more and more of your customers' time in the platform.
Yes.
In 2033, what do you think Lyric will be known for?
So first, to get to 2023, we have a lot of work to do, right? I think supply chains have a lot of problems globally, locally, in every country, many problems to solve. But since you're asking me, 2033, what we are saying supply chain today will apply to all operational decisions. It could apply to mines, it could apply to ports, it could apply to airlines, any business that has an operational aspect to it. We could be the platform where they make all these operational decisions.
And that will, of course, require more and more IP to come to the platform. A lot of the models that are in there today are used for common supply chain problems. But what will continue to be built in the Lyric Studio, I assume, will branch into a lot of these other verticals. And one thing that then I think leads me to ask is how the role of the forward deployed engineer or the customization piece of this to each vertical will change over time. You mentioned that you don't have that model today, and that cost is not something your customers deal with when they work with Lyric.
Correct.
What do you think the role of the forward deployed model is in businesses like Lyric going forward?
Yeah. See, I don't have any problem with the word forward deployed. The problem I have is with the word engineer. Because and I understand that model, right? The technology was too raw if you go back 7-8 years for a non-engineer to be working on the product to solve the business problem. So you needed really an engineer. So the forward deployed engineer makes sense in the historic context of where data science, decision science was few years ago. But moving forward, and even today with Lyric, I like forward deployed analysts as a word, right? These analysts have to configure something, even with agents, Cassie. Somebody has to configure something because the world of business is very complex. And you're trying to solve a very complex business problem with the software. Somebody has to do the translation from the real world to the software world, right? So that's the analyst. But that's not going to be an engineer. That's today, not even a bet I'm making. Today, you don't need an engineer. Today, you need an analyst with Lyric. And I think that's the way forward. And what will happen, Zach, from this point forward is what an analyst can accomplish is going to 10x, 100x. Right? So I think that's where the world of agentic AI is the gift that we did not plan for. Mm-hmm. In an enterprise, if you had imagined let's say a $50 billion company, I would imagine 40 Marias. It probably would be 5 Marias. Yeah, that could be happening. So that's where I see the world going in the world of analysts.
Well, congratulations again on the Series B announcement. Super exciting milestone for the business. And it's just that, a milestone, right? We know there's so much that sits ahead for you all. You've learned so much over the past 2 years, and you've been so deliberate in your approach to company building as a CEO. So I'd love to maybe just hear what's on your mind, right? As you come through this next inflection point, there's always this market chatter about Series B traps, right? Of people growing really aggressively before they're ready, et cetera. So walk us through just sort of some of the things that are on the mind of Ganesh and how you're going to navigate this next chapter.
No, I think the Series B trap is definitely top of my mind because the gear is changing. We have to recruit ahead of time as demand shows up. Right? You have to bring people on board, train them, get them ready for what's in front of us. So recruit and build business at the same time. And there's always there's a risk. And I keep reminding the team that, hey, look, the classic Jeff Bezos day one, right? It's like, hey, you can't relax. You can't take your foot off the accelerator. Things are going well for us. The market is saying, go build. Then it's our responsibility to go build. Right? So keeping the team on its toes, saying, hey, this is an opportunity. This is not a prize. right? So that's putting that front and center in front of us. Thankfully, we have a crew that is super motivated by the problems that they get to solve. So it's not that much of a distraction, but it's still my duty and responsibility to keep reminding them that that's the way we need to be.
Sure.
Like that's top of mind, I think.
Yeah. Well, Zach and I were smiling at each other because we talk a lot about day one at primary. It's required reading. And I think if memory serves me correctly from that letter, they said, at Amazon, you can work long, smart, and hard, but you can't pick two of the three. And what I've seen from you and the team at Lyric is you deliver on that in spades. So I think mission accomplished thus far.
Yeah, we're excited. The opportunity is so amazing, Cassie.
Yeah.
So we can't do nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, congratulations again on the journey so far.
Thank you so much, Cassie. And thanks, Zach.
Thanks.